All right, all right, all right. It seems that Matthew McConaughey recently just went on Joe Rogan's podcast and they talked UFO disclosure. Honestly, the conversation was quite fascinating, and being a fellow Texan, I'm a huge fan of Matthew McConaughey. So let's jump into this clip, see what they talk about.
Carl Sagan, I got to sit with him for a few hours before we made this film called Contact that I was in with Jodie Foster.
Fucking loved it.
You do?
One of my all-time favorite movies. I love that movie.
Oh,
and I
cool.
love Carl Sagan.
Yeah.
He wrote the book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Got to talk to him and listen to him, actually, for a few hours. Anyway, got to know his wife, and his wife's really cool, but her hello, her greeting is always, hey, what's your coordinate?
Whoa.
What's your coordinate?
What's your coordinate? Boy, she's out there.
But, I mean, that was similar of the north, south, east, which where are we coordinated? Where's the Earth coordinated in the galaxy, in the universe, in the hands of time? What has happened? What's our coordinate? It is kind of an out there, but it's a pretty cool objective way to go. Let me think about that. It reminds me of, you ever meet Bush 41?
No.
Hi, President Bush. How you doing today? Why, he's holding your hand. About an 8.2 today, Matthew.
8.2.
To the 10th. He would give you an answer out of 10 to the 10th of how he was doing. I always thought that was pretty interesting. Because everybody goes, oh, I'm good, man. Great. How are you?
That's some CIA shit, son.
He was adding it up to the 10th. What's your coordinate? About an 8.2.
He had numbers in his head.
Yeah.
You know, Herbert Walker was the guy that Hal Puthoff and a bunch of these scientists, he brought them together and said, we have recovered a crashed UFO on more than one occasion, and we have a back engineering program, and we're considering disclosure to the American people. I want you to list the positives, the positive impact of society, and the negatives.
Yeah.
And they did it with quite a few different scientists, and they all had more negatives than positive.
If they came out with this information,
Exactly.
to share this information, what would be the effect on society?
Yes.
More negatives than positive.
More negatives than positives.
Because?
Disruption of religion, government,
how does
economy.
That disrupt religion?
Well, I mean, it
I
depends on your
understand
religion.
how it does. I just don't.
Depends on your religion, and depends on where these things are from and what is happening. What do we know?
In the Bible, Ezekiel has golden chariots from the sky.
Exactly. Yeah, and a wheel within a wheel. Yeah, the Ezekiel stuff sounds like a UFO encounter. And it's not the only version of that in ancient texts. In the ancient Hindu texts, they have vimanas, these things that are flying through the sky. Like, what are those things? In the Rig Veda, even in the Bhagavad Gita, there's all these depictions of these things that sound like you're talking about a spaceship or at the very least some kind of technology. Like this thing about the Nephilim, like that the gods mated with women and created men who are monstrous. Boy, doesn't that sound like aliens came down and genetically manipulated primates and created human beings? That's a version of it that you could imply from the text. It's all really weird stuff, man. Like really weird. If you found out that was all true, it would probably change everything about society. And this is what Herbert Walker and those guys decided after. So Hal Puthoff was explaining it to me on the podcast, like how they put a numerical value to each thing. I'm like, like we were that close?
Right.
Like imagine if that happened. This is 1990, right?
All right, so this is super interesting, right? Especially this conversation that Joe Rogan is saying that he had with Hal Puthoff, where he described a meeting of the minds to discuss whether or not society could handle UFO disclosure. I've heard Hal talk about this before, and I actually remember him mentioning this on Joe Rogan's podcast. I've got the clip queued up right here.
And around that time, I had gotten a call from somebody I knew in Washington, D.C., head of a think tank. I can't name him, but he said, I need you to come to Washington to be part of a little project, a little briefing. And I said, no, I don't have the time. Right now, I'm just too busy. He says, look, come, it'll be the most important meeting you've ever had in your life. Well, since I had him calibrated because I had done other work with him and for the Navy and so on, I said, okay, I'll come. So I showed up there, and I saw people, some of whom I knew, including my ex-contract monitor from CIA, people from DIA, a lot of military people and so on. So he sat us all down and said, okay, here's the deal. Here's why I've invited you all here. Let's just say, he says, that the United States, Russia, and China have obtained ET craft that have crashed, and we have proof of that, bodies that aren't human. And so the question is, can this be released to the public? What effect would it have? So I and the other people, I found out by talking to them later, we thought, oh, this is cool. I mean, maybe we can get, some kind of disclosure here. And so he said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to make up a list of what would be affected in the culture with this kind of a disclosure. And by the way, at this point, we still didn't know, is he saying that that's true stuff, or is this a hypothetical? Or
right.
Well, anyway, make a list. So we came up with a long list, like, 60 items or something. You say, oh, wow, stock market might be affected, religions might be affected, whatever. Government affected, policies be affected, politics would certainly be affected. And then for each item, we had to go give it a score from +9 to -9 as to how intense the effect would be and whether it's positive or negative. So anyway, we broke up into groups, and our group had our list of 8 or so. And so we went down our list, and it turned out that we ended up getting net negative numbers. And let me tell you why you can get negative numbers. One of the things down toward the bottom of the list, we really got into the weeds, was, well, suppose materials from a crash retrieval of a non-human craft was given to Corporation A, but Corporation B didn't get any samples. And then years later, Corporation A is making lots of money based on what they got. Meanwhile, Corporation B has gone bankrupt. And then they find out they were excluded. Or they're going to end up suing the corporations, suing the government. I mean, it really gets gnarly when you get into the weeds and into the details. And so, as it turns out, with our group of 8 or so, we said, we get a negative number. Well, it turned out that all the groups got negative numbers. So the outcome of that exercise was, if you're thinking about disclosure, forget it.
Was this during George Herbert Walker Bush's?
No, it was during Bush 2.
George Bush, rather.
George Bush, yeah.
W.
Right.
So when this was all going on, you still didn't know what they had.
Didn't know what they had.
This was just... They were saying...
This could be hypothetical, or he could be trying to tell us something, but he wouldn't say. So.
Interesting. And how much time did they give you to compile this list and to generate these numbers of plus and minus?
It was 2 or 3 days. I don't recall right now.
How did you attribute numbers to things like the stock market? How did you figure out how that would be negatively or positively impacted?
It was just a gut response, basically.
You remote viewed it?
No, didn't do that.
No, but did you?
By the way, in the remote viewing program, one of the things they told us, look, you guys that are running this program, don't you ever think about remote viewing yourself. We learned in the LSD days that if the experimenters get involved in the subject they're researching, they lose their objectivity. And don't think you can sneak away and get away with it, because we'll get you on the polygraph. And so no, never did.
Don't remote view yourself. What a bizarre thing to tell someone.
That's what they said. So anyway, back to this. we came up with our numbers and said, this does not look like a good idea. So at that time, that was the viewpoint. Now, as we'll get into, at this point, I have a different viewpoint. I think there should be more disclosure than is apparent
Well,
in,
I think
in the culture.
that's much more common.
Much more common.
That
right.
thought is more common with not just academics, but even government people.
Even government people.
Now, one thing that Joe Rogan does get wrong is that he says it was Herbert Walker Bush that set this up.
Herbert Walker was the guy that Hal Puthoff and a bunch of these scientists, he brought them together and said, we have recovered a crashed UFO on more than one occasion, and we have a back engineering program.
Hal Puthoff, he says it's George Bush 2.
Was this during George Herbert Walker Bush's?
No, it was during Bush 2.
Bush 2. George Bush, rather.
George Bush, yeah.
W.
This is interesting because at the very end of the clip, Joe Rogan says 1990. George Bush was in office from 2000 to 2008, right? And I remember Hal Puthoff talking about this before where he said it was in the 2000s. So why is Joe Rogan convinced it's from 1990?
If you found out that was all true, it would probably change everything about society. And this is what Herbert Walker and those guys decided after. So Hal Puthoff was explaining it to me on the podcast, like how they put a numerical value to each thing. I'm like, like we were that close?
Right.
Like imagine if that happened. This is 1990, right?
So again, this is just very interesting to me. Hal Puthoff is describing this event in the early 2000s, but it's actually George Bush, the second one, right? So he says George Bush, right? Not Herbert Walker. I don't know. Just very interesting. I get maybe Joe Rogan just remembered it wrong, or there's another story floating around. I don't know. Honestly, Joe Rogan's heard so many stories, it's quite possibly just got that confused, to be honest with you. But just found that interesting. So let me know what you think in the comments. Can we handle disclosure? It seems like a weird thing they kind of threw together, and it's just by, our gut. And I mean, that's not even that sophisticated of a way to do it. And they mostly talked about the aerospace component, right? Nothing to do with religion or, right, society, stock market, right? And he gave no numbers, like Joe Rogan was saying, like he didn't explain any of that. So I don't know, just that seems silly. That seemed like a silly meeting and thing to put together. And, he doesn't know if they were hypothetical. Do they have crash UFOs and aliens? What? What are we talking about? I don't, China and Russia, I don't know. Either way, disclosure, right? Now he wants it. So what changed? That's what Joe should have asked. Well, what about those metrics have changed for you now? Is it still the same? Why would you go against the numbers, right? If the numbers said wasn't a good idea before, why would you go against the numbers now? Unless something's changed, right, in his mind. I don't know. Just throwing thoughts out, right? Let me know what you think down below. Found this fascinating. It was great to see Matthew McConaughey also interested in this topic and talking about it and bringing up Ezekiel's wheel and all that. That was cool. Just found that interesting. Look, love talking about this topic for sure, right? There's no question about it. It's quite fascinating. And we could be on the cusp of this so-called disclosure, but we could also not be, right? And, they've been making these promises for decades, right? And it's always just around the corner. So will that eventually happen where it's actually just around the corner? Guess we'll have to wait and see. Just around the corner. All right, betters. We'll see you in the next one. Remember, every day's a gift, y'all. Peace.